So you're probably looking to, cut through all the noise and get right to the heart of some really fascinating topics. Understand what truly matters without spending ages on it. Well, that's exactly what we're aiming for today. We are taking a deep dive into the lives of some incredibly impactful figures, the influential women of the Bible.
Yeah, and we've gathered, quite a range of sources that really shine a light on the significant power and the impact these women actually had. Our mission here is to sort of distill the core insights, explore how these women, often in very different circumstances, really shaped history and faith, sometimes in ways that might, surprise you. We want to get beyond just retelling the stories and actually understand the nuances of how they wielded influence.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this then. Because when you talk about influence, especially back then, in those ancient contexts, it's not always about holding, an official title or position, is it? What were the real keys? What made these women so effective?
That's such a critical point. What our sources show pretty consistently is that their influence often came from this powerful mix. Things like unwavering faith, a really deep sense of obedience to, their understanding of God's plan, remarkable courage too, wisdom, deep devotion, often shown through prayer, and just profound loyalty. And what's really fascinating is how these qualities let them exert influence that, went way beyond the usual roles or constraints for women in those societies.
Absolutely. And you see that so clearly when you look at motherhood. It wasn't just, having children. For so many of these women, it was tied directly into something bigger, a divine purpose.
Precisely. I mean, take Mary, the mother of Jesus. Her influence, being chosen to bear the Messiah, it's foundational, isn't it? Her faith, her obedience, and accepting that, frankly, extraordinary calling. It's central to Christian belief.
And then there's Hannah, her story, that heartfelt prayer, her promise to God, and it leads to the birth of Samuel, the prophet. It's just such a powerful example, isn't it? How personal faith and motherhood came together to actually shape religious history.
It really is. And Sarah, too, mother of nations through Isaac, even, at her advanced age, the text really emphasized her faith in God's promise. That's why she's so honored. It speaks volumes about believing when things seem impossible.
It's this recurring theme, isn't it? This link between a divine promise and becoming a mother. You think about Elizabeth, mother of John the Baptist. Her conception itself was seen as miraculous, a righteous woman, bringing forth the one who would prepare the way for Jesus.
Right, and even in, let's say, the more complicated story of Bathsheba, you still see influence through motherhood. Despite, the difficult start to her story, she becomes the mother of King Solomon. She played a really key role in establishing that Davidic dynasty. So yeah, motherhood in these cases, it wasn't just a family role. It was often an absolutely crucial piece of a, much larger divine story.
Okay, so we've seen this profound influence through motherhood, often connected to divine promise. But the impact these women had wasn't, solely within the home. Some really stepped into completely different kinds of roles, showing influence through, direct leadership and authority.
Oh, yeah.
Which must have been pretty unusual for the time, right?
Oh, it was definitely exceptional. Deborah really stands out here, especially given the norms back then. Women just didn't often hold public office. But she was a prophet, speaking with divine inspiration. She was a judge settling disputes and a military leader for ancient Israel. She didn't just offer spiritual advice. She actually led the nation. She guided an army to a really decisive victory. I mean, that's serious leadership in action.
And Miriam, Moses' sister, she's described as a prophetess too, right?
Yeah.
Someone relaying divine messages. She led the Israelite women in worship after crossing the Red Sea during the Exodus. That's a very powerful image, isn't it? Communal faith being led by a woman.
Exactly. And then moving forward into the early church, you've got Priscilla. Alongside her husband Aquila, she was known as a teacher and a leader. They even mentored Apollos, who was himself a really significant, eloquent figure in the early Christian movement. So their influence came from their authority in teaching, their active role in building up those new Christian communities.
Yeah, then you have these just incredible stories of women who used their courage, their strategic thinking, to literally save their people. Esther comes immediately to mind. It's almost like a thriller, that story. What were the key things, do you think, that let her have such an impact from where she was?
Well, what's so compelling there is how Esther, as Queen of Persia, she risked everything. Approaching the king without being called for, that could have been fatal. But she did it to expose Haman's horrific plot to wipe out the Jewish people. Her courage, yes, but also her wisdom in navigating that very dangerous court environment that was crucial in stopping a genocide. It's a really powerful example of using your position, however risky, for the good of everyone.
And, okay, it's noted as non-canonical, not in every Bible, but still widely respected the story of Judith. That's another really powerful example, isn't it? She bravely confronted and, well, defeated the enemy general, Holofernes, saving her whole city from a siege. These are women taking incredibly decisive, courageous action right when things are at their absolute worst.
Exactly. And their power, notice, it didn't come from commanding armies in the typical sense. It came from their strategic minds, their profound bravery, and their willingness to act decisively when absolutely everything was on the line. It really highlights a different kind of strength, one that might not always be overtly forceful, but is undeniably incredibly effective.
We also see this deep influence that just emerges from sheer faith, from unwavering devotion. These are women whose spiritual commitment just had this significant ripple effect.
Oh, absolutely. Ruth, her steadfast loyalty to Naomi, her mother-in-law, and her choice to embrace Naomi's God and people. It's just a beautiful story. And her faith ultimately brings her into the lineage of King David and down the line Jesus. It's such a powerful testament to how personal devotion can become woven into the grand sweep of history.
In Mary Magdalene, her life totally transformed after being delivered from what the texts call evil spirits.
Yeah.
This led to such a deep, abiding devotion to Jesus, and crucially, she becomes the very first witness to his resurrection. That's a pivotal event in Christianity. Her testimony carries enormous weight.
Yes, her role as the first to see the risen Christ and then to go and share that, life-altering news.
Oh, yeah.
It's profoundly significant. And then you also have Anna, the prophetess in the temple. She dedicated her long life to prayer and fasting, and her recognition of the baby Jesus as the Messiah, and then telling others about it. That's seen as a really important early confirmation of who he was and what his mission would be.
So, as we talk through these stories, you really start seeing these common threads weaving through, don't you? Strong faith, definitely. Courage, often in the face of terrible adversity. Obedience to their understanding of God's will, wisdom in how they acted. Deep devotion shone throughout their lives, and this unwavering loyalty, either to their people or directly to God. These weren't just like passive qualities, were they? They were the actual driving force behind their really impactful actions.
Precisely. And it's also vital to remember the sheer span of time we're covering here. I mean, these women lived across millennia, from Sarah, maybe around 2000 BC, all the way to Priscilla in the 1st century AD. So their influence isn't just stuck in one historical moment. It's really a testament to the enduring power of these qualities across very different eras.
So, okay, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the core takeaway when we look at the lives of all these influential women?
I think the main thing is that their power and influence were just incredibly multifaceted, really diverse. They weren't limited to just one kind of role or one single way of, making an impact. It was their faith, their often courageous actions, their contributions within this unfolding story of God's people. It all shows that influence can show up in so many ways, often in ways that might not be immediately obvious within the social structures of their day. These shared qualities, things like faith and courage, while seeming personal, they really position these women as pivotal figures, even in societies where women often had, limited public roles. They frequently acted as, conduits for divine will or agents of really significant change.
That's a really powerful thought to end on. It definitely makes you consider the different forms influence and power can take, doesn't it? Not just in these ancient texts, but, around us today in our lives. How many seemingly ordinary roles, or maybe quiet acts of faith, might actually be having an extraordinary impact that we don't even fully see? It certainly makes me want to dig deeper into these stories and maybe think more broadly about how individuals, regardless of society's expectations, can make a real difference throughout history and within religious traditions too.